The other day, I came across this video on the internet. It was this guy doing a home renovation project, right? And before he bought this house, he has had no prior excavation experience, not even remotely, like not even using a hammer, right? Or a screw gun or anything like that. But he did it. He bought this house for $200,000 and then he flipped it for over 600. And it's crazy. And in the video, he said that all he did was just put his head down and work. He didn't overcomplicate things, and he didn't go that far into what was needed, or that far, like too far into research, right? He just went on YouTube, searched up what he needed to do, and do it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the bliss of not knowing and how it can help you. If you're having a bad day, maybe this video can turn your day around. All right, let's get into it. So the bliss of not knowing. What is it? Well, it's what the name says, the bliss of not knowing. Now, when I think of this, I think of, let's say you're starting a project like coding, right? Learning a new language. What do you do first? You probably go to YouTube, search up how do I code in C++, right? This can be applied to anything. And then you probably see a video on bro code or maybe freecodecamp.org or whatever it is, and you click on it. And then you probably, if you're really motivated, you might get through an hour or two of coding, right? And after that, you say to yourself, let's go take a break, right? And then you never come back to it. But I saw that, right? I saw a lot of people doing that. I saw a lot of people saying in the comments that this has happened to them. So I kind of took a different step. What I did is I just Googled what, like, a documentation and just kind of messed around with it. I kind of went there not knowing what I was doing. And then I eventually created a basic calculator. It took a while. To be fair, there are other ways. You can go use boot.dev and go learn that way, but I feel like that way I really understood what it meant. So with this kind of new, and this is not new by any means, but kind of this not knowing what I'm getting into, I went to some research, right? Now, some people might argue by saying, well, the bliss of not knowing is that you're going to fail. Well, that doesn't mean that you're going to fail. It just means that things might take longer than expected, right? Because the more you know about something, right, the more vivid those obstacles or things become, right? The more vivid, things seem and more challenging things it seems, right? It makes things seem more complicated than they should be, right? So, for example, beginners only see the goal, right? They don't see the little steps of leading up to that, right? So, you kind of have to overcome this and say to yourself, well, if my hobby is hard or not, I'm just going to do it and just start. For my past couple of videos here, even my shorts, I've been saying just start. And it truly is that simple. You just have to start, no matter if you're going to fail or not. And if you fail, own it. Failing is probably the best part of growing because you're going to make mistakes and you're going to go even further, right? And obviously, I said before, the hardest part of doing anything is starting, right? But once you started, the momentum is usually there, and then you get, you learn the basics, right? Maybe you pull up a spreadsheet of all the little programs for C++, and then you can really have your imagination take over, right? Now, what I say, if you do this, don't search up any YouTube videos. Maybe go read an article or two, and especially don't use AI. Use AI to only explain stuff to you, not to give you ideas. Because I truly believe that, if what project you should do, maybe that can help you, but if you got it from AI or YouTube, then it's not really original, right? I feel like so many people struggle with coming up with original stuff when in reality all you really do is, go look at like a wheel, right? Maybe go look at a rim and you say, oh, I like this rim, but I wish it was different. I wish this part of the rim was beveled in more, right? Or maybe extruded out a little bit more. It can be one little small change. And that's an original thought right there, right? So next time you're out there and you're thinking, well, I have no original ideas, then, well, don't think that. It's kind of simple because an original idea could be the smallest change to anything, right? Now, I know this is kind of a weird topic, and some of you may say, well, this is like you're telling us not to learn anything. Well, I'm not. I'm just saying if you're having a hard time starting something or starting a project, just go in. Go in head first. Dive in head first, right? Just dive in head first because, the bliss of not knowing is that you won't know how complicated it will be, right? I feel like we fall for this trap because we search up AI, right? We use AI to say, is this really hard? How can I use this language to do this or to do that, right? It doesn't, that it tells you the answer right away. And then you get demotivated, right? Because, with AI and Google nowadays, we have infinite access to information in seconds, even less than seconds. And it's kind of destroying your ability to start. So, just do it. Simple as that. But, if you want to really give it a shot, just skip asking Google. Maybe ask Google how to start. After that, search up a documentation or a little help form, and then just start, right? Because, I'm going to go back to my coding example because people want to learn code, right? And then usually people Google, how hard is it to learn this language? Or what language should I learn? And then usually they read the AI summary and then they're done because they don't want to try it, right? Now, obviously, with any challenge, you're going to have this, right? You're going to read a little bit into it, say it's too hard, even before you try, right? And I think that's where the problem is, right? Is you Google all this information and you confuse your brain before you even start. You know, that's kind of silly in my head. Just start right away. How about you start? And if you don't like it later on, cool. And you can excel one off the list. Sure, you might say it's a waste of time and it saves me time by, seeing if I should do this or how complicated this is. Sure, it may do that. But, if you truly want to, cross that off the list and say, yeah, I've tried this, but I don't like it, then just try it, right? I feel like this is going to become more of a big thing with AI, right? I've already experienced this firsthand in my life where kind of creativity is taken over by AI, right? It's almost like a crutch. I've even seen this in my friends. And I've seen this bad. I've seen this with a lot of my friends. They have great ideas, great creative vision, and then they say, "How do I start?" They ask ChatGPT, "How do they start?" And after that, they give up. They just go back to TikTok, Instagram, and start scrolling, right? Because on Instagram and TikTok, they see cool ideas, then they search up how do I do this, and then they see that like, well, you have to have 5 years of experience or to start this or that, right? And then it kind of draws them away. How about instead of Googling what experience do I need, Google what do I need to learn? Where do I start? And then from there you go down the rabbit hole. I feel like this is a big thing with coding nowadays, right? you know, Especially with CS majors. I've been doing a lot of research into or coding majors and how they computer science majors and how they are not getting placed in the workplace. Well, it's because they go there, they use AI. I'm not saying everyone does this, but they go there, they use AI to give them the answer. They don't, comprehend anything. They don't dive into it without knowing how complicated it is, and then they don't challenge their brain. The brain's not getting used, right? Your brain's the most powerful tool if you didn't know, and you need to challenge it here and there. And they do that, and then they graduate college with a couple of projects that they got assigned from their teacher, and then they apply to jobs, and then don't get, they don't get the job. Versus the guy or girl who, dives into this topic, let's say learning C++, the syntax, or maybe this code structure, or C++ 20, or whatever version you want to specify in, right? They dive deep. They read the documentation. They read the manuals. They read how this code works bit by bit, right? And then they get an idea from it, and then they start building something, right? I've battled with this before, right? When, let's say I like this industry, like let's say you like a certain industry, right? And you want to start a business there, but you don't know where to start. And then you just keep searching, ask ChatGPT, where are some good ideas? And none of them are, clicking with your head. And then you just give up. I've actually realized, and I've done this before, especially with coding, right? Coding, coding projects and all this stuff, is that you actually gotta just start learning code. Do a couple basic projects here and there. Learn from videos, watch videos, right? After you get started head first, right? You get started and you don't know a lot and you're okay with not knowing a lot, right? It's the bliss of not knowing. This is what the video is called, is the bliss of not knowing. And you just that's it. That's simple as that. It's the bliss of not knowing can be your greatest helper. Because if you don't know how hard it is, then let's say if you know how hard it is to do this project, will you even start? Will you even challenge yourself? But if you don't know how hard the project is, then you probably will start because you probably say to yourself, well, it's not that bad. For example, with home renovation, like that guy I talked about in the beginning, he told himself, well, I don't know a lot about this, but how hard could it be? So next time you're at a crossroads with doing a project or not going down this hobby or something or anything, ask yourself, how hard can it be? And don't Google that. Don't Google how hard is this. Just Google, where do I start by learning this? Where are some simple ideas I can go off of, right? Don't ask AI, don't ask Google how hard something is, because it's obviously going to say yes or no. It's going to give you yes or no. Sometimes a maybe. And you read that and then you say, well, then I can't do this, when potentially if you do try it, you may find it easier than other people, and then you make spin off a million ideas with your head, and then you start a business and then you become successful. That's just a little, it could be that path or it could be a million different paths. It's not, yeah. All right, I hope every single one of you has a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And I hope every single one of you can find peace in your lifetime.